Then after the requirement document, we come up with something we call the scope of the project. That's driven by the project charter. And then that scope is going to produce something we call WBS. That WBS is the foundation of time management. Why? Because once you know what you're going to do, you can assign time to each task, you can assign people to each task, you can assign resources to each task, you can see how those different tasks are linked to each other. So the concept behind WBS, it breaks down the project. Project into tasks or activities. And your big game with time management is how are you going to put those activities together, to synchronize them, to line them up, to organize them in a way that would give you the total time of your project according to those estimations. So the first step is to look at your WBS and find out your activities. And then you are going to do an estimate. So let me just put them one by one. Find activities or the activities in your project. Number two, you need to estimate the duration of each one. Number three, you are going to line them up or order them according to their relationships with each other. So you are going to order or organize the activities. Then you are going to aggregate time to produce the schedule. And then you are going to manage that schedule, which means we're going to control that schedule, find out how you can adjust it to make it work with the deadlines that are assigned by your stakeholders. There are different versions of what I said, but that's the concept. So in order for us to organize activities, we have to know something very important, is the interdependencies. Which tasks depend on which task? Can you do a task while you're doing another task? Can you start a task before finishing another task? Can you start two tasks together at the same time? There's something we call start to finish. There's something we call start to start. Something we call finish to start. And there's something we call finish to finish. So those are four formats of the possibility of how those tasks can depend on each other. So one concept here, which is extremely crucial and very, very important, is to find how those activities are related to each other. Can you start designing a website before you analyze the requirements? Correct? Can you start building a database while you are building the front end? Yes, you can. So there are activities that can go hand in hand together, that can work in parallel. And there are activities that have to wait for something else to finish. Can you start taking 491 before finishing 490?
Unfortunately, not.
Correct? Can you start 490 before getting 288? 288? Done?
288.
Correct?
Unfortunately not.
Before Professor Andrew give you that final thing and before you do it? Correct?
Right.
So those are what? This is finish to start. You cannot start something before you finish something before it. You got it? So that's very important. But can you, if I convince the advisor, can you take 490 and 491 together? Maybe that's a possibility.
Start to start.
Advisor will not like it. 490 professor will not like it. I usually don't approve it. But if that was an exception because of some reason, you can do that. So that's going to be start to start. Like you can start this while you're starting this at the same time. So that's the concept. If you understand the structure of the courses in your curriculum and how you have to take something before something else until you finish the whole curriculum, that's exactly a schedule. That's the schedule of your graduation before you to finish NJIT work. The same thing is your product, which is going to take a year or one semester. So that's what we call interdependencies. Very important concept. The other thing is when you aggregate time, when you get the estimation of each duration, you have to put them all together. So when you look at your timeline, and you have all these little tasks here and here and here and here, whether they are working together or they are in parallel or they are having all kind of overlaps. So when you look at the end of all of this, you probably are going to find, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done this way. I was just trying to explain something and then I ended up confusing it. So you do it in a Gantt chart fashion. So when you have those tasks, you're going to have something like this. This is like an arrow that shows you the interdependency. The arrow starts from the one that depends. That's the one that we depend on, and it goes to the one the one that's dependent. Correct? So that's an independent. That's a dependent. Okay. Now, if they're doing in parallel, probably there's no dependency anyway. But there could be some kind of overlap, and there could be more, and more here, and more here, and more here. Each one of them has a different time, and more here, maybe, depending on what's going to happen. You can have this too, and then this could be your actual deadline that was assigned or expected by your sponsors. And this is where you are actually heading. This is your actual finish. So if you ended up after aggregating the time, which is looking at all the estimations of durations for all the activities that you have found, this aggregation led you to find that your actual finish is a lot more than this. What did we call that in cost management? You're well behind schedule. But now we're not doing that through doing PV and, you remember those things, correct? PV and what?
CV.
CV, yeah? The queen. Who is the queen? EV. EV? So the queen is EV. Remember the EV? So that EV was telling us about this with PV if you compare them together. So if EV was higher, then we are here. If EV was lower, that means PV is more. That means we have like planned for more than what we have earned, which means we have all this time that we lost. So this is actually can be measured by the performance indexes, or can be measured by the variances between the schedule and the earned value, which is the earned value management. So what should you do if you found that? The good news You're not gonna find that after the project is done. You're gonna find that before you even start the project. Because all what we're doing in time management is planning for the future. Of course, you can update, you can do tracking, you can do a lot of things. But the reality is you're doing that in advance. So once you find this, what do you need to do? I want to go back and see how I can put these things more together. Because if they're going to be extended, so what can you do here as a product manager? If you saw the situation, you estimated the activities, you found them out, what kind of activities are going to be in your product based on WBS. That's work breakdown structure, which is breaking down the requirements, the scope into smaller components, like analyze requirements, build the front end, create the database, correct? Do the final report, all the things that you have to do in your project, all the deliverables. There are gonna be tasks here that you have to do. And people break down tasks in two ways. There are different ways, but there are two major ways. One way, they look at the architecture of the system, and they break it down into components. Like, what's the architecture of an Android app? There's a front end, there's a back end, there's connectivity, there are other components here and there. So you look at the different elements that make that app an app. You look at the website, look at any software solution, look at any IT solution. What are the different components of it? Those different components need to be completed, one after another, or one in parallel with others. And those are going to be the tasks. But we build a hierarchy of them that goes from the final product, you decompose it like a tree. So it's a hierarchical diagram. The other way to do it is to break the product down in terms not of the architecture of the system, but in terms of the life cycle of the system, which are the phases. Phase one, analysis. How do you break it down? Identify stakeholders, gather requirements, document requirements, map or visualize requirements. Those are 4 steps of the first step. And then identify stakeholders, explore potential. That means different things too, like different steps to identify stakeholders. So if identify stakeholders was 1.1, 1.1.1 will be explore potential stakeholders. 1.1.2, filter or evaluate stakeholders, which means evaluate who is relevant, significant, important, and redundant. 1.1.3, finalize your stakeholders. So, and then you start breaking down each one of those tasks of your product phases into subphases, and a lot of examples, the scope documents and scope management sites. So those final tasks that are going to be at the bottom of that tree, the granular ones, are going to go into the WBS, and they'll be converted to your activities. You will estimate their duration. How do you estimate the duration? Remember last time when we were estimating things, and I told you that people always ask, how can you predict the future? And you guys were answering me what? By looking at the past.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. How does the weatherman tell you about the weather of New Jersey tomorrow? They haven't seen it yet. So, but they gathered some data, and they compared their data models with the models that we had before. So they found that, this data pattern looks like the other one. They match computer models and they predict the future. So what you do here to estimate the duration, you go always back to what? Your organizational process assets. Remember how many times have we mentioned this term? I really want to see it in your report. Okay? You see what you have gathered in the library of your project over time. And you look at that and you benchmark with it. So you can estimate duration based on previous projects. Like, if you're going to do another app, you think you are the first person who ever did an app in the world? Of course not. Have you been the first project in your company doing an app? Of course not. Have you been the first app that has been done for that particular customer? Maybe not. So if you just went back and was able to see all the similar products like yours and compared your work with them, what you're gonna find? You're gonna find, oh, I know how much stakeholder identification time that's gonna be taking because a previous team like ours, or maybe we did something like that before. So when you just start looking at previous experiences, you're able to estimate. Now, people, when they estimate time, they use a very popular formula. They call it expected time equal. Now, if you don't have to benchmark, if you don't have enough data gathered from the past, like some small businesses, some medium businesses, some large companies that are still going to organize themselves, so you're gonna use something like that. Expected time equal to optimistic time plus 4 realistic time plus pessimistic time divided by 6. And you have no idea how significant this formula is for all PMP professionals in the world. Standardization. I'm not saying it's necessarily going to be in everything, but I don't think anybody can pass the PMP exam without understanding this formula because it goes back and forth. So optimistic here is, O is optimistic. Is it the minimum time or the maximum time? I'm sorry?
Optimistic in the sense of minimum.
If you're optimistic with time, would you like to finish earlier or later?
Oh, okay, in terms of.
That's minimum.
Okay, I got you.
According to professionals. So there's something we always do in project management. We go to organizational process assets. If we did not find them, because there are no assets that were organized, because there was no data that was collected, then what do? You go to all the guys, to the expert people, not necessarily older, but the expert people who have done it before, and you ask them, what would you do if you were in my shoes? So we always go to something we call SMEs, the experts. You must have found it in many slides. Subject matter experts. So those SMEs are very popular in every organization, and we go to them when we need to find solutions because these people have more experience, more exposure, more training than us. We used to work with some kind of programs with J&J, and they would always tell the students to go to the SMEs. Who are the SMEs? What kind of term is that? Those are the subject matter experts. So they're gonna tell you if you're optimistic, you're gonna finish it within 2 days. If you are realistic, in most of the cases, the average time is going to be, and there has another term instead of realistic too. That's gonna be normal time, average time. And if you're going to have trouble and problems, if your product is risky, facing risky situation, that's going to be pessimistic, then that is going to be the other alternative. So if you want to expect the time for a project that is, for example, optimistic, is going to be the people said 2 days is going to be the best way to. I mean, if you got the best developers in the world, you're going to do it in 2 days. So that's what If you want to see how many projects we have done before, what was the average time of doing this particular task, like doing the front end of the app, you are going to say, oh, the average time was really about 4 days. Oh, if you really had a hard time, a lot of problems, your developers are not well trained, they're not skillful enough, that's going to be maybe pessimistic, but 7 days. We have seen 7 days people, teams doing the front end. So what would be the calculation here? Expected time is going to be 2 plus 4 times 4, correct? Plus 7 divided by 6. What would be that number? Yeah, 4, 4. Yeah, my 4 looks like 9, I know. I'm very bad at drawing numbers. Yeah. 4 something. You don't want to calculate.
Oh, I'm
Whether or not, yeah, because I'm not gonna calculate what I'm,
Yeah,
So, yeah.
or something.
yeah, it's for something, so this is like an example.
4.16 or
So
so.
you are going to do, you're going to do this for every single task in your Gantt chart.
Right.
And this is how your Gantt chart is gonna look like anyway, okay? So you're gonna do it for every single task in your Gantt chart. You're gonna estimate this. Now, there are a lot more advanced techniques that I'm not gonna even throw them in this course. But if I'm doing that in the fall and spring, I would certainly do that. I would teach you how to give your managers based on their prediction. Like if they wanna be 95% confident about your results, how long that is probably gonna take? You can tell them how about that. If they are they tell me, just tell me 80% confidence, 85. You can use that confidence level of your statistics to give them that estimation based on another calculation. Actually goes with P minus O divided by 6, but it's a long calculation. It goes into standard deviation and it has other stuff too. But I'm not gonna go through this now today. If you just saw it in the slides, that's what we are referring to. There are like 5-6 slides just about this. It's a concept that's not even in PMP, that's not required in the PMP exam. It's just an additional concept that I thought was very helpful, because many times you want to have the highest level of confidence when you talk to your decision makers in the company, in the enterprise, and that allows you to do that. So, back to our concepts. We know how to estimate durations using what we call the 3-point estimate. And sometimes they're related to what they call the PERT chart, or the PERT estimate. And they have other terms for it too, but it's a very, very popular concept in project management professionally today. And it has to use this formula that you see in front of you. So finding the activities has to go with WBS. And that has to be based on the requirements in the scope management. Estimating durations is going to be based on mainly benchmarking with the organizational process assets, so you can even bypass this whole thing if you could. Or using the subject matter experts to tell you about this and this and this for each single task. And based on that, you can build your Gantt chart with all these estimations. And thirdly, you have to see the interdependencies. Are you gonna take 490, 491, 288 to 4490, or they can do them in parallel. You're gonna find for each task, does it go in parallel? Does it overlap? Is it start to finish? Is it finish to finish? Is it finish to start? Is it all these kind of things? The fourth thing is aggregating the time, which is putting all this together into a schedule that's produced by the famous Gantt chart. And when you have the Gantt chart, have you heard about Gantt chart? So Gantt chart, I'm going to show you, of course. Gantt chart is a very popular chart that, I don't have an example of it here. Okay.